Starting off this list, in our number 10 spot we have the Teapot Dome scandal. Ah yes, what's a list of cover-ups without a good old story of bribery? Albert Fall was the Secretary of the Interior to former President Warren G. Harding, and while in this position, he decided to secretly allow oil companies to tap into the Teapot Dome oil reserve in Wyoming and the Elk Hills oil reserve in California. Of course, the reason he did it is because he could make a ton of extra money doing this, like several $100,000. This all started to unravel though in 1922 when there was an expose that revealed the oil had been sold without any sort of competitive bidding. After this expose, Robert La Follette, who is a senator in Wisconsin, created an investigation into this story by the Senate Committee on Public Lands. The Attorney General at the time, Harry Dowdy, began to get some flack for not investigating this alleged corruption, so Harry turned to the FBI director to help him out. The FBI director, William J. Burns, sent an agent to Robert, the senator from Wisconsin's, office to search for anything that could have been used to blackmail him into stopping the investigation into the corruption. Despite this seemingly obvious threat, Robert knew this meant that his investigation was going to reveal something serious, which motivated him to continue on with it. In the end, the shady dealings and bribery was revealed and Albert Fall was officially exposed. This entire ordeal led to him being the first United States Cabinet Secretary to go to prison. In our number 9 spot today we have the Dreyfus Affair. In 1984, France's government and their army were in some hot water for a series of scandals that had recently happened when a janitor discovered papers that revealed just another scandal to add to the list. This janitor had found papers in a garbage bin of a German military ambassador that revealed that there was a French officer who had turned against them and who was spying on the Germans. When this came to light, they needed a way out of the mess, so they decided to use a scapegoat, a man named Alfred Dreyfus. Alfred was a Jewish officer in the French army and they decided to accuse him of this spying and the selling of secrets. His trial was huge in the media and he ended up being sentenced to life imprisonment on Devil's Island, and really hateful and prejudiced groups used his as an example of a quote-unquote unpatriotic Jewish person. Later, the chief of military intelligence would uncover evidence that proved who the real spying culprit was, but when this happened, the chief of military intelligence was removed from his position by his superiors to try and keep the secret from getting out. It is said that French authorities tried to suppress these accusations, but a novelist named Émile Zola continued to accuse the army of a cover-up. People were torn at this point. Some people swear that Alfred was still to blame, while others were convinced he was innocent. In the end, the fight became more about principle rather than whether or not Alfred was really innocent or not. There were 12 years of controversy surrounding this case until Major Hubert Joseph Henry ended up admitting to forging the key documents before taking his own life. The case was finally reopened, and while Alfred was found guilty again, he soon received a pardon from the president. A few years after this, a civilian court of appeals found Alfred innocent, and he went on to have quite an army career, and he even fought with honor in the First World War. This was a scandal that really did change French politics forever. In our number 8 spot today we have the Ford Pinto. Introduced in 1971, the Ford Pinto would go on to become the car with the worst safety reputation, but of course not without an attempt to cover up all of the flaws first. During the car's development, during the final stages, there was crash testing being conducted, and this is when designers found out a flaw with the car. Basically, through their tests, they found that the fuel tank's filler neck had a tendency to be torn away, which would then spill gasoline under the car, as well as the fact that the tank itself was able to be easily punctured by nearby bolts. To fix this issue, it would have cost about $11 per car, but instead of spending that money, they decided to just do nothing. Yeah, they just said F it and figured that it would cost less to pay off the people who bought the car and had the issues that caused their car to catch fire. Sounds absolutely insane, and thankfully an investigative reporter by the name of Mark Dowie thought so too. He went through a ton of paperwork that lay in the US Department of Transportation's file cabinets, and this is when he found what he was looking for, a memo where the company calculated that settling the lawsuits brought against them would save the company $70 million rather than just installing the new parts and fixing the issue for everybody's safety and well-being. Mark wrote an expose on the story, and once published, a jury in Orange County, California awarded $125 million in damages to a man who'd been injured in a Pinto that caught fire. The ruling was later reduced to just $3 million, but it did kickstart the end of the car and the beginning of the scrutiny that the company would face. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Prohibition poisoning. You probably already know about the Prohibition era, but if not, this was a time period where there were restrictions placed on the consumption of alcohol, which was done with a ban being placed on the production, importation, transportation, and sale of alcohol by the US government, and this lasted from 1920 to 1933. In knowing about the Prohibition comes the knowledge that this ban certainly did not stop people from producing or consuming alcohol, it was just done in sneakier ways. The black market for alcohol was booming as people began to drink redistilled industrial alcohol instead. This is all pretty well known, but one super sketchy thing that is definitely less well known is something that government agencies did to curb the black market sales of alcohol. Basically, they poisoned the industrial alcohol that was being repurposed for drinking, and not just poisoned in a way where the drinker would get sick, which is already horrendous enough, but they poisoned the alcohol with lethal chemicals. It is thought that by the time the Prohibition ended, at least 10,000 people died from this. This event is still one of the strangest and deadliest decisions made by government officials. In our number 6 spot today, we have the health risk denial. In this day and age, everyone knows that smoking cigarettes isn't great for your health, but back in the day, people didn't know, and the tobacco industry did everything they could to make sure that they never found out. In 1950, a physician and epidemiologist, Dr. Ernest Winder, published a study in the Journal of the American Medical Association that pointed out the links between cigarette smoking and lung cancer. This is something that is well known and studied now, but at the time this was news to much of the public, and to hide it, 6 major cigarette companies began to fund their own research efforts in response to the study. The study wasn't aimed at actually getting to the bottom of the health risks, it was just a research project meant for publicity reasons. In reality, they already knew about the health hazards and that there was a possible link to cancer. In a 1953 survey of scientific literature, a man named Cloud Teague, who was a chemist for R.J. Reynolds Tobacco, concluded that, quote, studies of clinical data tend to confirm a link between the heavy use of cigarettes and lung cancer. A scientist for a major tobacco company at the time knew and had studied the links, and they were still trying to cloud the public perception of this huge issue. The entire strategy was later revealed in a 1972 industry memo, which described it as, quote, creating doubt about the health charge without actually denying it. Finally, this madness was brought to an end, sort of, when the attorney generals from 46 states joined together in one massive lawsuit against the tobacco industry. As a result of this, while they can continue to make their harmful product, in 1998 the companies agreed to pay $10 billion annually to make up for the damage that they had done. In our number 5 spot today, we have the Chernobyl disaster. In April of 1986, crew members of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in Ukraine were running a test to see how long a reactor's turbines would continue to supply power in the event of an electrical power outage. This test, however, went famously wrong due to a malfunction caused by a power surge. This caused overheating of the water inside of the reactor, which released a buildup of steam and thus explosions. These explosions caused radioactive debris and gas to be released into the atmosphere for the following 10 days. The story of Chernobyl is famous now, as it is one of the largest nuclear disasters in history. There were immediate deaths and more that followed shortly after, but there also has been a countless number of effects seen throughout the years it's been, and the area still remains dangerous due to the contamination. Despite the magnitude of the disaster, however, Soviet officials, because at the time Ukraine was a part of the Soviet Union, they didn't publicly admit that the accident had happened at all. For 2 days, they kept totally quiet about this extremely dangerous thing, and it only came out when Swedish officials rang the alarm bells as they had found increased levels of radiation that had drifted 1,000 kilometers westwards over to them. You think at this point they would have just fessed up, but of course not. The Soviet leader at the time, Mikhail Gorbachev, waited 3 weeks before even publicly mentioning the accident. Who knows what level of effect this might have had in a multitude of ways. In our number 4 spot today, we have the safety cover-up. Karen Silkwood was an American chemical technician and a labor union activist who was very vocal and often raised concerns about the corporate practices that related to the health and safety of those working in a nuclear facility. You would think that this is something that all of those working in the field would be concerned about, but apparently not. She worked a job making plutonium pellets and was the first woman on the union's negotiating team, and after she testified to the Atomic Energy Commission about the things she was concerned about, it was discovered that she had plutonium contamination on both herself and in her home. Plutonium isn't an issue outside of the body but can easily be ingested or inhaled, which is when it creates a major problem for humans. Karen was driving to meet with a New York Times journalist and an official of her union's national office after deciding to go public with some of her findings, and the people who saw her right before she left for this meeting saw her with a binder full of documentations of her findings. During her trip in her car there, Karen ended up driving off of the road and striking a culvert, and this accident took her life. Here's where things get really suspicious though. That binder I just mentioned was never found. It was said that Karen had fallen asleep at the wheel and that almost twice the recommended dosage of methaqualone was found in her system, but there were clear skid marks on the road which suggested Karen was trying to get the car back straight on the road, and despite the accident being entirely at the front of the car, there was damage to the back of the car that friends and family say wasn't there before, and paint chips were found which would suggest a car had hit her from behind. To make this whole thing even more suspicious, apparently Karen was receiving death threats before her passing. There have of course been claims of foul play and claims that she was run off the road by another vehicle, but unfortunately with little to no evidence these claims have never been able to be proven for sure. But what is for sure is that whatever really happened to Karen, it seems like a simple accident doesn't cover the full truth. In the end, however, because of everything that went on with Karen, the Department of Energy opened an investigation and ultimately shut down the facility. In the end, although it is so horrible that Karen lost hers, she definitely saved countless others' lives. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Pentagon Papers. In June of 1971, the New York Times published a few different excerpts that were taken from a top secret Department of Defense report that pertained to the United States and their involvement in the Vietnam War from 1945 to 1967. These papers were created as a part of a study by Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara, and the reason they were so important and secret is because they revealed that 4 consecutive presidential administrations had lied to and misled both Congress as well as the American people about their involvement in the war. Daniel Ellsberg, who is said to have been a military analyst who opposed the war, leaked these confidential government records, and him, as well as the New York Times and the Washington Post, all faced criminal charges in court for their efforts to get the papers into public knowledge, but in a turn of events the charges were later dismissed. Not only were these papers important, but the leak was a crucial moment in time because it bred major distrust in the United States government that would only go on to grow. In our number 2 spot today, we have Operation Paperclip. I suppose this is less of a cover-up and more of just a secret operation, but this one was kept a secret not for the safety of the people, but instead to prevent an uproar from the public. This operation began in 1946 when the President of the United States at the time, Harry Truman, authorized it. Basically, the entire point of it was to lure scientists from Germany over to the United States after the Second World War. This was done in an effort to aid the country in their post-war efforts, as well as to ensure that the valuable knowledge these people had would not end up in the hands of perhaps the Soviet Union or either side of the divided East and West Germany. Had it not been classified information at the time, this would have been highly controversial, as many of these people were involved in, and sometimes even leaders of that hateful party we won't mention by name again. Former President Truman stood by his decision, saying that because of the relations with the Soviet Union, quote, this had to be done and was done. Several of the scientists a part of this program were later investigated because of their former ties, but one was only ever tried out of the over 1,600. None of the paperclip scientists were ever found guilty for any crimes either in the United States or in Germany. Perhaps the most famous of all of the paperclip scientists was Wernher von Braun, who really played a huge role in advancing NASA's Apollo missions. In our number 1 spot today, we have the Watergate scandal. It's perhaps one of the largest scandals and leaks in history, especially in the history of the United States. In the middle of 1972, there were 5 men who were arrested for breaking into and subsequently trying to bug the Democratic National Committee headquarters at the Watergate Hotel complex in Washington, D.C. As the year went on, the 1972 presidential election came closer, and there was an anonymous source who fed information to Washington Post reporters that, quote, the Watergate bugging incident stemmed from a massive campaign of political political spying and sabotage conducted on behalf of President Nixon's re-election and directed by officials of the White House. Despite this information leak and it being reported on the news, Nixon was still re-elected, but he was also under serious investigation. There was a series of Senate hearings, and the Senate even went on to create a special investigative committee. The hearings were broadcast nationwide, and they had witnesses testifying that Nixon had approved plans to cover up administration involvement in the break-in, and that there was a voice-activated taping system in the Oval Office. These hearings captured the attention of Americans everywhere for weeks, and in the end, the United States Supreme Court ruled that Nixon had to release these Oval Office tapes to government investigators, which then went on to reveal that he had not only attempted to cover up what went on, but he also later tried to use federal officials to deflect the investigation. Under the threat of an imminent impeachment, Nixon had no choice but to admit his guilt and resign, making him the only president to do so. His successor, Gerald Ford, ended up pardoning him, so he escaped prosecution, but there were 69 other people indicted, with 48 of them later being convicted. Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have the Benton fireworks disaster. This one is like a cover-up within a cover-up. It's a cover-upception, and that is because of the fact that this entire thing happened in an illegal business. Basically, back in 1983, there was a factory explosion in Benton, Texas that claimed the lives of 11 people. This factory was where the illegal business was, and they made illegal fireworks, and their cover-up story for the business was that they were a worm farm. What? A worm farm? I guess I wouldn't necessarily suspect there to be an illegal firework factory at the worm farm, so it's kind of a good disguise. Anyway, the biggest problem with this entire operation is that none of the workers were properly trained or knew how to handle these dangerous chemicals. There was no Walter White in this operation. Like, so much so that one of the workers, who would later testify about what went on there, explained that others at the factory would fill the fireworks with, quote, chemical stuff, and her job was to add liquid glass and diffuse. No one is entirely sure what caused the explosion, but there are a couple theories. The leading theory is that, while normally the explosive ingredients were mixed by hand, on this day they might have been trying to mix it with something different, like an electrical appliance. The other theory is based on how there were packs of cigarettes and a lighter found in the debris, so it is possible that someone might have been smoking in the building. Either way, the explosion was so huge that it was felt 20 miles away, and investigators determined the factory to have been the largest and most profitable known illegal fireworks operation in US history. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Burnley Park disaster. This is the name used to refer to one of the worst incidents in all of soccer history, or football history if you want to get really specific. The Burnley Park disaster took place in 1946 when 33 fans died at the stadium one day before the game started. Despite these deaths, the game did start and the players went on and played the game. All the while, these bodies were allegedly just covered up on the sidelines. The thought is pretty horrifying, and it makes you ask, how could this have happened? The thing with this particular game is that it was the first competitive match since World War II, so of course people were excited. So excited that the stadium capacity was 70,000, but 85,000 people showed up. As this surge of people showed up for the game, the crowds began to push through, which led to hundreds of people being injured and the 33 deaths that we already spoke about. Most of the crowd had absolutely no idea what had happened. They didn't know that people had lost their lives, and the players were just told to go ahead and do what they were there to do. This means that while people were laying dead and many more were laying injured, some severely, there were thousands of people who were just completely kept in the dark, and they went on cheering, none the wiser about what had just happened. In our number 8 spot today, we have the Snowden disaster. Back in the 60s, the Soviet Union had planned to launch Russia's R-16 ballistic missile in July of 1961, but someone had a problem with this. That someone was the commander of the Soviet Strategic Missile Forces, Mitrofan Nedelin, and he thought it would be a grand old idea to push up the launch to November 7th, 1960. It was the anniversary of the Soviet Revolution after all, but of course, rather than anniversaries and celebrations, safety should be at the forefront of something like this. Because of the fact that almost an entire year was shaved off of the preparation time to launch, corners ended up being cut. Even with these corners being cut, workers were still scrambling to get everything finished, with work being completed on the day of the actual launch, even after the rocket was fully fueled. But despite the workers' best efforts to get everything ready in time, things ended in disaster. Some kind of an error led to the second stage rocket firing while being tested before the launch. This means that the second stage 1 was firing directly into the first stage 1, which was full of fuel, and the whole thing turned into one enormous explosion. This meant that everyone who was still working and remotely close to the launch were killed. The camera operator was able to remotely activate automatic cameras set around the launching pad, which caught the entire explosion. The footage showed that people near the rocket were incinerated instantly, while those further away either burned or were poisoned by the toxic fuel component vapors. Of course, this is terrible and tragic, but here's where the cover-up comes in. The news of the disaster was suppressed for many years, so much so that the government didn't even acknowledge it until 1989, almost 30 years after the incident occurred. It has been reported that even the families of those who lost their lives were made to keep quiet about the entire thing so as to ensure that there were no news leaks. In fact, they were told to tell people that their loved ones had died in a plane crash. That was how far the government was willing to go in order to cover their tracks on this incident. In our number 7 spot today, we have Operation Tiger. This operation was actually one in a series of large rehearsals for the D-Day invasion of Normandy, which took place in April of 1944. This project went horrifically awry, however, as coordination and communication problems led to there being friendly fire. This led to an Allied convoy that was positioning itself for landing being attacked by E-boats from the Kriegsmarine, which resulted in 749 American servicemen deaths. The terrible happenings don't end here though, because, like I mentioned, this was a part of D-Day and the invasion. This was incredibly secret, so no one reported on it at all, meaning the family members of those killed had no idea. After D-Day, it is even said that then this was an event that was still quite minimally reported on. Many people believe that since those who made the plans for this rehearsal were not expecting any kind of attack or for things to go this way, they tried to keep everything under wraps so as to not be culpable for anything that happened. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Great Mississippi Flood. The Mississippi Flood of 1927 was one of the worst natural disasters of the century, as hundreds of thousands of homes were left destroyed, with even more people being displaced in Arkansas, Mississippi, and Louisiana. As a response to this horrible disaster, then Secretary of Commerce Herbert Hoover, along with the Red Cross, began setting up fundraising to restore the over 23,000 square miles of land that had been covered by the flood, and also, of course, to provide a great public image for doing so. Herbert quickly went on to receive this recognition. I mean, he was already looked on quite favorably because of his involvement in providing food to refugees after World War I, so now with this flood, he had a chance to once again save the day, this time in the public eye. This is what led to the huge media campaign that basically showed how devoted Herbert was to helping everybody affected by the flood. You know, the guy wanted to be president, so he wanted to look good, and the Red Cross needed him to look good because they are relying on public donations. And this is what led to everyone covering up what was really going on in these relief efforts. As it turns out, at most of these camps set up for people who were affected by the floods, black people were being held and forced to do hard labor and work on the levees. Only black refugees were being held and kept from escaping while being forced to do this work, threatened with weapons should they refuse, denied enough food, not being given shelter. To understate it, it was an atrocious violation of human rights, and while people were trying to speak up, the great humanitarian campaign was just too loud. This entire ordeal would later come out, unfortunately not early enough however, as Herbert would go on to win the presidency 1 year later. There is a really incredible paper that goes into more detail about this insanely unjust cover-up that is titled "The Red Cross is Not Alright," and it was written by Miles McMurtry for Dartmouth College in 2016, and if you want to learn more, it's really well written and it gives an incredibly comprehensive view over what happened and how it affected the race relations at the time. In our number 5 spot today, we have the Chang rocket disaster. On February 15th, 1996, an attempt to get a satellite into space went horribly wrong. The communications satellite was made by American company Space Systems/Loral, and the rocket to get it there was the largest launch vehicle ever made in China. This rocket, however, failed shortly after the launch took place, which ended in it crashing into a nearby village. After the accident, a state news agency only reported that the launch had failed, but there was absolutely no mention of the subsequent crash and explosion. No one was really informed about this at all until 2 weeks later. That is when a more thorough report was revealed, and it not only identified the cause for the failure, but also explained that there were only 6 people who had passed away, and there were 57 injured, but 49 of them had already gone home from the hospital and were recovering totally fine. Here's where things get tricky. There are many people who believe believe that this number of only officially 6 deaths was way lower than the number in actuality. Western media has speculated that a few dozen to somewhere around 500 people might have actually been killed in the accident, not only because of the village that the rocket crashed into, but also because of the reports that hundreds of people had gathered outside of the center's main gate near the crash site the night before launch. Some authorities and reporters also described seeing dozens of ambulances and many flatbed trucks loaded with what could have been human remains being taken to local hospitals. This has all led to stories of this alleged cover-up. Will we ever know for sure what happened? Only time will tell. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Kish Disaster. The nuclear disaster that you might not have heard of. This disaster was hidden from the public for decades. In 1957, there were some citizens of the Soviet Union who had the option of living in secured nuclear towns. These citizens were picked and needed to qualify, but the perks seemed great. The citizens of them would have better wages, better healthcare and education, just a better quality of living. But there was the obvious potential danger of living over a nuclear site, like Chelyabinsk 40, which was built on top of a dump for plutonium waste. This of course proved to be a horrible problem when the storage facility exploded. The subsequent cloud full of radioactive material was so large it went on to contaminate the 9,000 square miles around the facility. Despite this clearly huge and lethal explosion, no one was notified of it right away. The people in the surrounding area of course knew that something had happened, especially when the military personnel showed up and they were suddenly being told to kill their farm animals and their crops, but no one was entirely sure what, because no one was informing them of why. This blast affected at least 10,000 people who were all left in the dark for quite some time. In the end, it wasn't until 1979 that the disaster became public knowledge. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Fleet Street phone hacking. This is a scandal that started to unravel back in November of 2005 when Clive Goodman, who is the royal editor at the tabloid News of the World, wrote a story about Prince William and a knee injury he suffered. The thing is though, this knee injury hadn't been publicly revealed, which helped the royal family to quickly realize that someone had hacked into the prince's phone, likely his voicemail, which gave them this private story. Scotland Yard of course got involved, which led to them arresting not only Clive, but also Glenn Mulcair, who was a private investigator for the tabloid. In 2007, they both received jail sentences after they told authorities that they had gathered backdoor codes used by networks and used them to hack into and listen to people's voicemails. This isn't where the story ends, however, because in 2009, The Guardian, who is of course a rival of News of the World, revealed that the parent company of the tabloid, News Group International, had paid out over £1 million to settle lawsuits that might reveal the real depth of these phone hacks and other data breaches that they used to their advantage. Then another revelation came in 2011 when The Guardian reported that the police uncovered that the phones of over 5,800 people had been hacked by the private investigator. As a result of all of this coming to light, media mogul Rupert Murdoch ended up shutting down News of the World in 2011, and in 2012 he admitted that there was a cover-up to hide all of this, and he publicly apologized for all that went on. In our number 2 spot today, we have Rathergate. Apparently there's a lot of gate scandals, and this is just one of them. Also referred to as the Killian Documents controversy, this whole thing started on 60 Minutes too. They were presented by CBS anchor Dan Rather, and the documents were extremely critical of former President George W. Bush's service in the Texas Air National Guard, and the reason it was such a big hit is because the documents were presented less than 2 months before the 2004 election, which of course could negatively impact his run. Later, however, it was revealed that CBS hadn't done enough to authenticate the documents, and that they were actually forged in order to try and push this controversial story of military service. Instead of just coming right out to say it though, apparently CBS stuck to the story and doubled down and claimed the documents were real and that the story was true. Eventually, especially as other news outlets followed up, the story couldn't go on any longer, and CBS was not only forced to cop up to the mistake, but also most of the staff that worked on the show ended up getting fired as well. In our number 1 spot today, we have the Bano Dam Disaster. Back in 1975, when Typhoon Nina struck, the Bano Dam was one of several that couldn't stand the storm. As the typhoon hit, there were 65 dams within 3 days that collapsed. It was truly catastrophic, and this left everything headed over to the Bano Dam, and despite everything going on, they thought the dam would hold, but of course it didn't. Here's the thing though, not everyone thought it would hold. In fact, hydrologist Chen Zing tried to warn the government that the dam was not being built properly and that it was about to fail. When he tried to ring the alarm, however, he was fired for being problematic. When the dam failed, just like Chen said it would, liters and liters of water washed through the nearest village, absolutely devastating millions of people. Over a week later, 1.1 million people were still trapped. After the disaster, the government remained mostly quiet to the public and didn't allow any media to make reports, and it actually wasn't until 2005 that the official documents were released, because until then they were considered classified state secrets. It is thought that 85,000 people passed soon after the dam broke, and through famine and disease afterwards, a total of 230,000 lives were lost.
Number 10. NSA Surveillance. The Washington Post originally uncovered the existence of a National Security Administration and FBI program called Prism, allowing the agencies to take photos, videos, emails, and even chats from various different servers and internet companies like Microsoft, Facebook, Google, and Apple. Anonymous then leaked 13 documents that they said detailed the specifics of the Prism program. A statement posted with the leak said, "These documents prove that the NSA is spying on you, and not just Americans. Like we said, this is happening in over 35 countries and done in cooperation with private businesses and intelligence partners worldwide. We bring this to you so that you know just how little rights you have. Your privacy and freedoms are slowly being taken from you, in closed-door meetings, in laws buried in bills, and by people who are supposed to be protecting you." Number 9. Russian leak. 3 Russian entities, the Ministry of Culture of the Russian Federation, the City Administration of Blagoveshchensk, and the Governor's Office of the Tver region, all lost hundreds of thousands of emails when the anonymous group hacked them and leaked over 700 gigabytes of data. The emails contain sensitive information like state policies regarding art, cinematography, archives, copyright, cultural heritage, and censorship. The group had also previously said that they managed to shut down Russia's space agency, preventing the country from having the power to spy using satellites, reportedly downloading and deleting confidential files related to the satellite imaging and vehicle monitoring. They also stole 35,000 different files from Russia's central bank, all of this coming as part of an ongoing group effort to get Russia to withdraw from their conflict. Number 8. Police documents. In June of 2020, Anonymous completed Operation Blue Leaks, which involved hacking and releasing a massive amount of police documents. They got information from over 200 different law enforcement agencies and gathered a total of 269 gigabytes of data. The documents included things like phone numbers, banking information, and even alleged crimes. The documents were apparently leaked to provide insight into the strategies and mindset of law enforcement. One person involved saying, "I've seen a few comments about it being unlikely to uncover gross police misconduct, but I think those somewhat miss the point, or at least equate police misconduct solely with illegal behavior. Part of what a lot of the current protests are about is what police do and have done legally. It's the largest published hack of American law enforcement agencies. It provides the closest inside look at the state, local, and federal agencies tasked with protecting the public." Number 7. Canadian Centers. After an event took place regarding one of the group's members, Anonymous gained a bit of a vendetta against the Canadian government that led to their targeting. They leaked a high-level federal document that included information about the redevelopment of Canada's key diplomatic centers in Britain, the National Post even confirming it to be authentic. It was marked Confidence of the Queen's Privy Council and included information about the cost of the selling, relocating, and rebuilding of Canada's Foreign Affairs Department in London, but it was mostly focused on the eventual profit that would come about as a result. It raised many alarms within the government and population about just how secure our information is, and what other secrets could be at risk to be easily stolen and published. A spokesperson for Anonymous said that the information was leaked in order to try and influence the federal elections. Number 6. Census Bureau. Back in 2015, Anonymous targeted the United States Census Bureau, their hacking group compromising the data of over 4,000 workers. They did not share how they managed to get the information, but did release it from the databases, including usernames, emails, and phone numbers of government staff. A spokesperson for the Bureau confirmed the attack, saying, "The U.S. Census Bureau is investigating an IT security incident relating to unauthorized access to non-confidential information on an external system that is not part of the Census Bureau internal network. Access to the external system has been restricted while our IT forensics team investigates." Anonymous claims their motivation for the attack was to protest the Trans-Pacific Partnership trade negotiations, which were rumored to potentially lead to the privatization of services in the UK like free healthcare. Number 5. Chilean Army Leak. In 2019, the people of Chile started protesting inequality, and things between the protesters and the police force and military quickly started to get violent. This led to Anonymous targeting Chile's military in a large leak of their information and data. The contents of 6 different email accounts and a total of 3,500 emails were hacked and released to the public. The information included things like meetings between army officials and businessmen, contact with foreign security firms, and even cooperation agreements with the United States government. 2 of the most prominent email accounts to be exposed were that of the financial boss and the director of intelligence for the army. All the emails were uploaded to an information distribution center and were made available to be accessed by anyone. After the incident, the Chilean army worked hard to implement further security measures and try to track down those responsible. Number 4. Federal Reserve. In 2013, Super Bowl Sunday was shaken up by not just a football game, but by Anonymous hacking into the American Federal Reserves. They managed to gain access to personal information of government members and banking officials, including their phone numbers, home addresses, email addresses, and passwords of around 4,000 different people. Anonymous apparently did this as part of an ongoing protest against the U.S. Department of Justice. A Federal Reserve spokesperson said, "The Federal Reserve System is aware that information was obtained by exploiting a temporary vulnerability in a website vendor product. The exposure was fixed shortly after discovery and is no longer an issue. This incident did not affect critical operations of the Federal Reserve System." Other attacks that took place as a part of the same protest included the hacking of the website of the United States Sentencing Commission. Number 3. Canadian Security Leak. There was another attack against the Canadian government that took place just before the first one that I mentioned on this list, all a part of Anonymous's grudge against Canada. These leaked documents revealed information in regards to Canada's spy agency, the CSIS, or Canadian Security Intelligence Service. It shared sensitive information like the size of its network of foreign stations, the volume of secret communications they handle, and their outdated system of information sharing. Before the release, the government had only previously acknowledged 3 foreign stations: Washington, London, and Paris, but a leaked classified document revealed that there were actually over 25, many of them, quote, "located in developing countries and or unstable environments." Apparently, their security systems had not been updated since the 1980s. A spokesperson for Anonymous saying, "We are now privy to many of Stephen Harper's most cherished secrets," Stephen Harper being the head of the country at the time. Number 2. Operation Hong Kong. Similarly to the situation in Chile, Anonymous's Operation Hong Kong came about as a response to the mistreatment of protesters. In 2014, they announced that they would be launching a massive cyber attack against Chinese government servers and bringing down their websites. An anonymous statement said, "Here's your heads up, prepare for us. Try to stop it. The only success you will have will be taking all your sites offline. China, you cannot stop us. You should have expected us just before abusing your power against the citizens of Hong Kong. Throughout October of that year, Anonymous made claims that they had already managed to access many of the country's government websites, and apparently had sensitive emails that they were threatening to release. However, it doesn't look like any of these emails ever actually made it to the public eye. Number 1. Syrian President Leak. In 2012, Anonymous managed to hack into the Syrian Ministry of Presidential Affairs, gaining access to the email accounts of 78 staffers working under the current president. It was apparently a pretty easy job, as it was revealed that the man didn't have a very secure password. 33 of the 78 email accounts all used the password 12345 or 123456. Not exactly Fort Knox. Hundreds of different emails were revealed, including a conversation between the United Nations and the president's media advisor, preparing him for an upcoming interview with Barbara Walters. The year before this, Syria also received the attention of the hacking group when they hacked the Syrian Defense Ministry, changing their website to give a message of support to the Syrian people who were trying to fight back against the control of their president.
Starting off this countdown, we have the Blue Leaks. In June of 2020, following the killing of George Floyd and the protests, Anonymous leaked hundreds of gigabytes of law enforcement files. It has been named the Blue Leaks. Over 269 gigabytes of data were taken from over 200 law enforcement agencies. This included emails, audio recordings, videos, and documents. In total, there were millions of files leaked. Some of the leaked documents show that the FBI was monitoring the social media accounts of protesters, and they were also alerting local law enforcement about anti-police messages. Other documents showed that the FBI was tracking Bitcoin donations to protest groups, as well as highlighted some scandals and police misconduct. In our 9th spot, we have Trump's dirty laundry, and I don't mean like literally his stinky socks and undies. In May of 2020, Anonymous came after Trump during his presidency. This happened when Trump threatened to deploy his military force against the protesters. But Anonymous was like, nah, honey, you aren't doing that, and said they had dirt on him. They said that they would publish his dirty laundry. A couple of days later, they published 169 emails that mentioned Trump one way or another. Now, most of the emails weren't even bad, but it was just a scare tactic to show Trump, like, hey, we're not bluffing, okay? We got dirt on you. More on this in my next point. Coming in at number 8, we have Trump's connection to Jeffrey Epstein. So like I said, Anonymous leaked some emails about Trump. Well, they also threatened to release information connecting Trump to Jeffrey Epstein. Now, Trump and Epstein have been photographed together on a number of occasions. Apparently, they also have hung out with each other too. Some believe that Trump was a part of Epstein's ring and also exploited young females. And Anonymous apparently has proof, including access to Epstein's address book and old court documents. Technically, I'm cheating with this point since they didn't leak this information, but they did expose that they have this information. In our 7th spot, we have the Brazilian government. In June of 2020, Anonymous released personal information on the Brazilian president and his family and cabinet. This caused a lot of chaos. The federal police and the Brazilian Congress began to investigate. In the end, it was revealed that the federal government used $2 million of the public's money to fund advertising on several websites. Most of the websites supported the president, which makes sense as to why they wanted to put money into them. Not only that, but Anonymous leaked a number of government officials' addresses, income, and other personal information. The personal addresses were a very serious issue because it puts them at risk for attacks. Moving on, at number 6, we have CSIS documents. So what I didn't know is that apparently Anonymous has some beef with the Canadian government. One of their first attacks leaked secrets about the foreign activities of the Canadian Secret Intelligence Service, aka the CSIS. It released information about the size of their network, what information they have access to, along with other sensitive government documents. The Canadian government has only admitted to having foreign stations in Washington, London, and Paris. But according to the documents leaked, they have over 25 foreign stations. And I quote, many of which are located in developing countries and/or unstable environments. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with the secret federal document. In another attack against Canada, Anonymous leaked top secret documents outlining the redevelopment of Canada's key diplomatic centers in Britain, including selling, relocating, and refurbishing Canada's diplomatic buildings in London. Now, it's nothing groundbreaking, but it's the fact that they got a hold of these top secret documents that's concerning. The documents were marked as confidence of the Queen's Privy Council, which basically means that it's top secret and private documents. Therefore, the government of Canada is looking into its own people to see if someone among them is leaking these documents to Anonymous, or maybe they're a part of Anonymous. In our fourth spot, we have the hashtag Ops Wakeup 21. In January of 2021, Anonymous attacked the government of Malaysia. They defaced 17 government and university websites. This was part of their campaign called hashtag Ops Wakeup 21. Basically, the purpose of this campaign was to highlight the poor security of the government's websites and to warn people about it. In a post, they said, and I quote, "Greetings, we are Anonymous Malaysia. This is message to Government Malaysia. Your security system is low. All data may be leaked. This can cause unwanted hackers selling all your information." Basically, they accused the government for keeping silent and covering up a number of data breaches that occurred over the years. The government knew that personal information of their citizens was being obtained and sold, and they just kinda covered it up until Anonymous exposed them. Coming in at number 3, we have Anonymous Malaysia Part 2. During the Anonymous Malaysia attack, they also revealed that Facebook was selling private information to government agencies. In a post, Anonymous said, and I quote, "If you're a hacktivist willing to, or a man who just wants to protect his freedom of information and join the cause, and kill Facebook for your own privacy. Facebook has sold information to government agencies and gave secret access to information security firms so they can spy on people from around the world. You can't hide from reality where you are. You're neither safe from any government. Someday you'll look back on this and realize what we've done here is right. You'll thank the internet government. We will not harm you, but we will save you." Okay guys, it is time to deactivate Facebook. Nice. Coming in at number 2, we have Epic. In September of 2021, Anonymous leaked data from Epic, which is basically a domain registrar and web hosting company that has provided service to websites that publish neo-Nazi and extremist content. It's a pretty controversial platform, and Anonymous leaked details of every domain that was ever hosted or registered through them. It also leaked a number of personal information of their customers, like their purchase records, emails, invoices, and credit card information. Over 15 million email addresses were exposed. In fact, they released 3 rounds of data on their website. The first was in February of 2021, the second in September, and the third in October. In October, they actually leaked information on documents belonging to the Texas Republican Party. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the NSA. So thanks to Edward Snowden, we all know that the NSA was spying on Americans through their phone records. Well, Anonymous just exposed the existence of a secret NSA and FBI program called Prism. This program allows the NSA and FBI to take photos, videos, emails, and chats from the servers of 9 different internet companies, including Microsoft, Facebook, Google, and Apple. Anonymous leaked 13 huge documents about this program, and it revealed that the NSA is not only spying on Americans, but also citizens of over 35 different countries as well. Anonymous said, and I quote, "We bring this to you so that you know just how little rights you have. Your privacy and freedoms are slowly being taken away from you in closed doors meetings, in laws buried in bills, and by people who are supposed to be protecting you."
Coming in at number 8, we have the Snowden Files. Now, of course, these were leaked on a much more secure website than Reddit. Snowden went to the press to get out all the classified info, but the thing is, I've read all about this on Reddit. It was going gangbusters on there, and you can still go back and check it out. For those of you who don't know, Edward Snowden was working with American intelligence and leaked a ton of info about how the NSA was looking at all your emails, sorting all your phone calls, and they could access all of that info at any time, and frankly they probably still are. I mean, just talk about something around your phone, like this. Look at this. I need to buy ninja equipment for a ninja school. I need ninja stuff because being a ninja is cool. I want to be a ninja. Discount ninja clothes. I'm gonna get ninja ads now.
Filling at number 7 slot are the Montebello Island. So during the 1950s, the British government ran 3 nuclear bomb tests at the Montebello Islands, located near the coast of Western Australia. Operation Hurricane occurred on October 3rd, 1952, where 25 kilotons of plutonium were dropped. Then came Operation Mosaic, taking place in the middle of 1956, where 15 kilotons were dropped on Tremio Island and 60 kilotons were dropped on Alpha Island. This really isn't a big deal. Nuclear bomb tests were done so routinely back then, and the islands were uninhabited, so no one was really getting hurt except of course the Aboriginal people that lived there. Their tribes were right on the mainland next to the islands, and they're extra vulnerable to the radioactive fallout, but that wasn't even taken into consideration by the Safety Committee or the Atomic Weapons Research Establishment. There was already huge radioactive fallout all over the mainland. There was even radioactive rain on the coast of Queensland. I just find it funny how the dose levels were ignored when it came to the Aboriginals. Like, oh, we don't care. If they're not white settlers, we just don't care.
At number 6, we have the death of the Challenger pilots. Here's some gruesome details about the Challenger pilots that Cyrax2112 shared on Reddit. He said when the spacecraft exploded, the people on board didn't die right away. Even though the news flying around the world for a long time was as soon as it erupted into a ball of flames, the pilots were killed. Well, that wasn't the case. Apparently, most of the pilots survived the initial explosion and were flying around in the worst terror of their lives as they came crashing down to the planet. On top of this, NASA knew this right from the beginning, but they kept this information a secret. They knew that if they made the crash seem more gruesome than it already was, that it would ruin the space program. And you know what? They were probably right. I mean, the crash was already the worst PR they could have received, and if you pack on news about people suffering before they died, no one would ever want to go to space again.
Coming in at number 5 is Devil Eyes. So back in 2005/2006, the CIA was working on a project dubbed Devil Eyes, and it concerned Osama bin Laden. Their plan was to create a bin Laden action figure and sell it throughout South Asia, but there was a catch. They wanted to make it so when the paint on the figure was heated, it would peel off, revealing this demon-like figure with green eyes, red skin, and black marks underneath. The point was to scare the younger Asian generation and turn public opinion against the real Osama. They're saying it like all the kids in South Asia were like, oh, we love bin Laden. We don't. At all. The project was done with a former Hasbro executive called Donald Levine, who has also been called the father of G.I. Joe toys. In 2014, the CIA admitted the program was real, but that they had cancelled it after only 3 prototypes. But according to Reddit and the Washington Post, and someone who was directly involved, yes, the program was discontinued, but hundreds of figures were still shipped to Karachi, Pakistan. My parents just moved there. Let me see if I can find one of these. I will let you guys know.
Coming in at number 4, we have sterilization. Redditor Ultra Meow wrote on Reddit about government documents that were found which highlighted the sterilization of Native American women without their consent. These were discovered in 1972. Apparently this was a common practice, as the American people were constantly trying to wipe out the Native American population, and to this day have done very little to repair the damage that has been done.
At number 1 is tracking. So this one's a bit iffy since it wasn't initially leaked on Reddit exclusively, but I found out about it from Reddit exclusively, so I'm gonna make it count, cause I wrote this video and I can do what I want. Okay, so don't worry, Che wrote his part, I'm not taking all the credit. Anyway, back in March of 2019, NBC7 managed to get their hands on a bunch of documents the US government had created. On it was a secret database of journalists, activists, and influencers who were advocating immigration. In some cases, the database put alerts on these people's passports, but what brought these people under the lens is the migrant caravan at the end of 2018. 5,000 immigrants from Central America entered the US, and as the migrant caravan reached San Diego, they were met by attorneys, journalists, and more. Any journalists that helped any of the migrants or covered the story became targets of intense searches and inspection by border officials. Sounds like my life every time I go to the airport and get randomly checked. Okay, so random. Some advocates even get detained for 13 hours, others would be pulled into secondary inspection 4 times. Agents collect information on these people, the data shows their face, their social media, their passport numbers, everything. Homeland Security even said, "We are a criminal investigation agency, we're not an intelligence agency, we can't create dossiers on people and they're creating dossiers. This is an abuse of the Border Search Authority." Wow, I actually agree with them. This is majorly screwed up.
Moving on at number 9, we have Nixon's Health. Now, this isn't really classified information, but I thought it was quite interesting, and it was brought to my attention by Kelly, Roy on Reddit. So, the files of Richard Nixon's longtime physician, Dr. Walter Tkach, probably said that last name wrong, are on lockdown. The doctor's son has the files and is planning to eventually release them to the Nixon library, but when he does, they will not be open for 75 years. Not only that, but taped conversations between Nixon and his doctor are also on lockdown, and they will not be released. Now, why is this significant? Well, some people believe that Nixon was incapacitated towards the end of his presidency. If so, then under the 25th Amendment, he should have had his authority suspended. So there's a reason why the government has been keeping these files classified. It's going to apparently expose a lot. In our 8th spot, we have the trade documents. Back in 2019, the Reddit account OsterMaxNN leaked a bunch of UK government trade documents. The documents discussed future trade deals between the US and the UK. They also revealed plans by the Conservative Party to privatize National Health Service. After investigation, it turns out that the Reddit user that leaked the documents was part of a larger coordinated effort from Russia. Reddit said, and I quote, "We investigated this account and the accounts connected to it. And today we believe this was part of a campaign that has been reported as originating from Russia." In our 7th spot, we have Area 51. Everyone wants to know what really goes on in Area 51. Is it really where they're keeping aliens? I need to know. But sadly, we don't truly know. But we do have some insider information on what it's like in Area 51. Yeah, you heard me. 8 years ago, a Reddit user by the name of Kiver16 revealed that his mother's boyfriend is Stephen Gorvan, aka one of the people who was at Area 51 testing the Mars rover. He uploaded a picture of Stephen holding a sign saying, "Hi Reddit, ask me anything," as proof that it actually was him and he wasn't just gonna make it up. So people quickly jumped to it, asking him tons of questions on the mysterious base. During one part of the Q&A, Stephen revealed that when he first arrived at the base, he saw a strange aircraft flying low across the desert floor. He believed that it was a test flight for a secret aircraft. He said it moved at subsonic speed and didn't make a lot of noise. He also revealed that Area 51 is much bigger than it looks, with tons of different sectors and buildings. Now sadly, he didn't see any aliens. But he did reveal that it seemed like we are close to hoverboard technology, like the ones you see in Back to the Future. So that's pretty cool. Moving on to number 6, we have D.B. Cooper. One of the most famous and mysterious cases of all times. And I might have found out what happened to him. But first, let me give a rundown on this dude for the people who have no clue what I'm talking about. Dan Cooper, or D.B. Cooper, is a man who was responsible for a plane hijacking in 1971. No one knows who he is or where he is now. So in 1971, Cooper boarded the plane, and once in the air, he handed the flight attendant a note saying that he had a bomb in his suitcase. He demanded $200,000 and a parachute, but he didn't want any hostages. So they landed in Seattle, he got his requests, and then he told the pilot to fly to Mexico City. However, along the way, he took the money and his parachute and jumped out of the plane. The police looked for Cooper until 2016, and this case is known as one of the longest active searches in history. Now, 2 years ago, a former FBI special agent joined Reddit and did a AMA, Ask Me Anything. To prove it was really him, he held a piece of paper like the other dude, saying his name and his Reddit, blah blah blah. The man is Mark Ruskin, who worked 20 years in undercover operations. One of the questions that someone asked him was about D.B. Cooper, and what the FBI thought happened to him and what he thought happened to him. Ready for this? Both the FBI and Mark believe that D.B. Cooper did not survive the parachute down. I know, so anticlimactic, but apparently they have evidence to suggest he didn't make it. In our third spot, we have the blood supply. Okay, this one is going to be pretty crazy. So back in 1984, the Red Cross Society in Canada was importing blood products from the US. This was at the time of the AIDS crisis, and America was hit much harder with it. There was fear that the disease was going to be transmitted through this blood. But the Red Cross ignored it, and according to this Reddit user who was a lab worker for the American Red Cross, apparently they were aware of this and so was the US government. But they didn't warn Canadians. Instead, they told them they had nothing to worry about and that they tested the blood before sending it. The guy was forced to keep his mouth shut and lie. As a result, tons of hemophiliacs who had blood transfusions later died of AIDS. What's freaky is that the Reddit user that shared this information later deleted his account. I just hope that he's safe and that the government didn't come for him for exposing them. And in our number one spot, we have the blue van. Okay, this one thoroughly creeps me out. Like, it just proves that the government is up to no good. So this story was posted on Reddit by a former homicide detective. One time he was called to a scene where the victim had called 911 saying that someone was trying to kill him. He told police that he was hiding in his panic room. When they arrived at his house, there were no signs of forced entry, and all the doors remained locked from the inside. Inside the house, there was no damage, it was just super clean, no signs of violence or anything. Due to this, the detective believed that the attacker was someone that the man knew and invited inside. When they eventually got to the panic room, they found the man sitting on the floor. His face had a terrified expression plastered on it. Both of his arms were missing, not cut off. They looked as if they had been ripped off. His missing limbs were never found. Now, here's where it gets spooky. As soon as they reported their findings, the police captain told the team to give all of the evidence, along with the victim's body, to the individuals in a blue van that had arrived on the scene. The blue van belonged to the government. After they did this, the case was buried. They never heard any more information on it. Like, what? Seems like some government creature got released and killed this guy or something like that, and then they're trying to cover it up.
Number 10. Spy tools. Back in August 2016, a group named the Shadow Brokers were the talk of the town. How could you not be with a name like that? That name makes them sound like a comic book villain. The Shadow Brokers? What? But check this out. The Shadow Brokers would basically steal cyber weapons from an NSA hacking unit and then proceed to sell them online to the highest bidder. The Shadow Brokers. I can't lie, it's a pretty sick name. The intentions, however, not so rad, not so radical. These tools have been used by many countries and many schemes. China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, you name it. These cyber attacks are also no joke. Once the entire city of Baltimore was under quite the cyber attack. I swear to God, the entire city. The 2019 ransomware cyber attack, all connected to said Shadow Brokers. Yeah, whoever this mysterious group is still remains a mystery. Is it you? If so, click thumbs up on this video. Number 9, hide your bread. Putting your money in your mattress sounds a lot easier than this system, that's for sure. Way less complicated too. Back in 2016, journalists all over the world were looking into what's called the Panama Papers, a plethora of leaked documents. Now these all came from a law firm, Mossack Fonseca. The operation here was that the firm would help the super rich hide their money in these offshore tax havens. And before you ask, yes, they got caught and this whole thing was, of course, shut down. In total, there were 140 politicians from 50 countries who were all busted, including the Saudi Arabian Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and Iceland's former Prime Minister Sigmundur David Gunnlaugsson. Yeah, y'all guilty. And we found out. Just be rich. Just be rich and do the things you have to do when you're rich. Don't hide your money. Number 8, SIM cards. In February 2015, it was reported that Snowden, our good boy Edward Snowden, he provided documents that showed that the NSA and the GCHQ had all hacked into a Dutch company that is responsible for manufacturing and supplying 2 billion SIM cards per year to big names. Names like AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, you're probably paying for some of these, you name it, right? While this hack would suggest that the agencies would then now have access to billions of unique encryption keys, which could potentially allow them to bypass wireless providers and monitor both the voice voice and data transmissions of every user, i.e. us, the company had actually been the target of at least 2 sophisticated intrusions, and they believed that the NSA and juicy headquarters, GCHQ, were all responsible, but the company then denied that the hack was successful in gaining access to all these encryption keys. Yeah, no, just the dirty text, nothing else. We're good though. Let's just hope that's the case. I mean, honestly, I'm deleting my history anyways, just to be safe. Number 7, military dolphins. Yeah, I said military dolphins. We're gonna get weird now, I guess. Iran has plenty of nuclear capabilities, but they also have trained dolphins now too, so good game. Back in 2000, Iran bought this fleet of trained dolphins from Russia, just, Russians doing Russian things, but they were trained supposedly by the Soviet Union to attack ships. And yes, even people. We have Navy SEALs and military dolphins. This is it, behind the scenes for Aquaman 2, I guess. What's going on here? Well, recently, like 2018 recent, satellite photos revealed a Russian naval base in Syria with pens that are commonly used for holding, you guessed it, dolphins. Yep, the dolphins are back. Ooh. Russia and the US both have fleets of trained dolphins to detect mines, but now Iran's in the mix as well. Is the next world war gonna be dolphins? That would be loud. Number 6, secret iPods. Nowadays it feels like there's a new iPhone or a new iGadget every other day. Technology is evolving a little too fast, I'd say. VR? Not for me, I'm not ready. My body was not ready for that. Music is also personal. Spotify, way too personal. But have you heard of Apple's top secret iPod? Would you get one of these? I'd pre-order it, let's do it. Back in 2005, former Apple software engineer David Shayer revealed that the tech giant once partnered up with the US Department of Energy. This special iPod was designed to test radiation on the go without drawing any attention from the public. Yeah, imagine this thing in an Apple commercial. Just dancing silhouettes, having a good time, and then just one guy suspiciously in the background, like, listening to music. This was of course top secret information back in the day, but Apple secretly helping the government by putting a Geiger counter in an iPod for a spy, it's next level, that's shady. We're gonna talk about that on this list for sure. Number 5, catfish. I mentioned bird drones in part 2, so obviously I gotta mention robot android catfish. Yep, you didn't believe them, they've arrived. What are we gonna do now, folks? The general public found out about this hidden spectacle in 2020. Catfish robots, specifically one named Charlie. Yes, it has a name. It isn't like the rest of the fish in school, okay? This one's actually an undercover agent working for the CIA, so he's a different fish. This all initially happened back in the 90s when the CIA was trying to collect water samples, obviously in secret, so they would send Charlie Chaplips upstream by using wireless communications. That was their high-tech, that was their James Bond plan, believe it or not. And yes, this was high-tech stuff at the time, all hidden inside the 60cm long catfish. Sometimes spy tech is cool, like a secret iPod, that's neat, we like that. This was not one of them. I don't think Charlie will make an appearance in the next Mission Impossible movie, you know what I mean? I don't think Tom Cruise is gonna send up a robotic fish. Number 4, caller ID. Back to our boy Snowden for this one, of course. He's so good, how can we not talk about him? The king of leaks, besides Sony, obviously. In 2013, it was revealed by The Guardian that, according to the documents that were leaked by Snowden, the Obama administration allowed the NSA to collect different caller information from Verizon. Yeah, this was done through what's called a business records proposition of the Patriot Act that was established under the presidency of one George W. Bush. So, this allowed the government to order Verizon to hand over caller information every single day. Yeah, all those breakups, all those prank calls, give them here. This information included things like the time, location, and the duration of your calls. The information also began being collected under the Bush administration in 2001, and they were collected from AT&T, Verizon, and Bell South. Now, of course, once these documents were leaked to the public and this information was, widely spread, US officials began trying to reassure the public that this surveillance was somehow necessary and was actually a program vital to national security. Yeah, no worries, guys. We have to do it. We're trying to help you, Help us help you by showing us your text messages. But many people, like you're probably thinking right now, thought that the spying was unnecessary and it was an invasion of their privacy. I have to agree. Number 3, more documents. I mentioned earlier those offshore accounts for those higher-ups, those big bad boys. Well, a year later, after that 2016 scandal, even more documents were exposed. All the docs, all around the clock. Docs around the clock. Didn't even script that, that's how good I am. Docs around the clock, we can franchise that. Meaning, even more secrets, even more names. Spill the tea, who is it this time? Well, amongst the 13 million documents, we saw Nike and Apple. Yeah, they're shady, who knew? They had around $250 billion hidden in offshore accounts. On top of that, they were financial connections to the literal Queen of England and Justin Trudeau. Yeah, our Canadian lad. We got mad at him a lot for going to his cottage the last few years. Meanwhile, we forgot he's in some offshore accounts. There you go, some more juice to get mad at him about. Number 2, Project Dishfire. This one sounds calming. Project Dishfire. Sounds like the best detergent you can get. It was reported by The Guardian that the NSA collects 200 million text messages a day from around the world. Yeah, I'm just exposing all of your secret texts for this one. I was really coming for you. I bet half of these texts literally just say, "You up?" The government's like, damn it, we'll try again tomorrow. They would then use these messages to pull the details of its user. You know, location, time, contact information, and credit card details. Stuff you don't want out there to anybody, especially people wearing dress shirts. Ugh, the worst. It was also reported that the NSA also provided British intelligence agencies with all of that data, just without the actual context of the text messages, that's comforting. Basically, they have all this data, and at any point they could extract anything they wanted, like older purchases, past travel plans, past financial transactions, all your contacts, regardless of whether or not you're being investigated for anything at all, just because they feel like it. Yes, this sounds illegal, unethical, and quite shady, and it really was. All this happened right before former President Barack Obama gave a speech about proposed policy changes in response to the Snowden leak, so the timing couldn't be more crucial. And finally, number 1, VX gas. The government using gas to take out targets. What is this, Mission Impossible? This is scary. I won't be able to sleep after this. What am I writing? VX gas is tasteless and it's odorless. It can take you out just by skin contact alone. The nerve agent VX is of course extremely illegal as well, obviously. It came from ICIS research from the early 50s when developing new insecticides. And it worked, a little too well I'd say, and it was swiftly and thankfully outlawed. But the bell can't be unrung now, can it be? This was the same nerve gas that was used to take out Kim Jong-nam back in 2017. That was a new revelation we discovered. We're like, oh, it was this gas. That's terrifying. Yeah, he was attacked at an airport. 2 people rubbed a cloth on his face, that's all it took. It was covered in VX, and then he died on the way to the hospital. He had a seizure. How scary is that? Initially, officials thought cyanide was used here, but in reality, it was only 10 milligrams of VX. So far, that's the only confirmed case of VX being used to take somebody out. Again, the only one we know so far, so sleep in fear, that's all I'm saying. Number 10, the FBI files on Bigfoot. Yeah, let's talk about those. Why not? Because they exist, apparently. Bigfoot, also known as Sasquatch, had all of his FBI files released in response to the Freedom of Information Act back in 2019. The files contained correspondence between the FBI and individuals who claimed to have evidence or sightings of Bigfoot from the 1970s all the way to the 1990s. The FBI conducted a limited analysis on some of these items submitted, including hair and tissue samples. We got some Bigfoot DNA. He's walking by, scratching, and we found a hair or 2. They ultimately concluded that the samples were of no scientific value, but they're still files, which is terrifying. The files also contain internal memos discussing how to respond to calls about Bigfoot, but overall, the FBI's involvement with the creature was sadly quite minimal. I know, I want him to be real too. I really want him to exist. He'd be funny to bump into on the street with that goofy walk. He has a powerful stride, Bigfoot, eh? He has like those, it's all in the quads for him, for sure. Number 9, Full House. During World War II, the United States and Britain, they would secretly create these maps, tiny little maps, these cheat sheets almost, that could help prisoners of war escape from German camps. Now these maps were then printed on thin paper and disguised as regular playing cards. How badass is that? The cards were designed so that they could be peeled apart to then reveal a detailed map of a specific area that would help prisoners navigate safely away. Anywhere else is great. The decks were often given to prisoners by aid organizations or distributed by covert operatives, which I gotta say, what a scary job that would be. That's like some Inglourious Bastards type stress right there. Playing cards, dealing them out to the right people, that is so brave. Oh my gosh. The fear of being caught, I couldn't even imagine. The plan was successful in helping many prisoners escape, and it's considered a remarkable example of resourcefulness and bravery on all ends during a time of war. That's, again, I can't even shuffle cards, let alone do this. Are you kidding me? Number 8, Project Seesaw. In the 1960s, the US military explored the possibility of weaponizing lightning as part of a program called, you guessed it, Project Seesaw. Yeah, weaponizing lightning, like they're Thor, I guess. The goal was to use rockets to inject chemicals into thunderstorms, triggering lightning strikes that could then be directed towards enemy targets with thin wires. Now, it sounds insane. It definitely was. Didn't quite work out. The project was ultimately, thankfully, abandoned due to technical and logistical challenges. Yeah, you can't predict where a lightning strike is going to happen, and the difficulty of accurately targeting them as well. It's not going to work out. We're not Tony Stark. We're not doing the Avengers weaponry stuff. There was also concerns about the potential environmental impact of the program. Can't just send shit into clouds, guys. Despite its failure, Project Seesaw remains an example of how far humans will go in the name of warfare. Weaponized lightning? Listen to yourself. Number 7, Iran military dolphins. Back in the 1990s, Iran reportedly began training dolphins for military purposes, which sounds so crazy it's almost funny in a way. I don't know, it reminds me of sharks with laser beams attached to their foreheads. Sounds made up, it sounds insane. These military dolphins are trained for many tasks, including detecting underwater mines, locating enemy divers, and identifying underwater obstacles. Again, kind of hilarious, kind of terrifying. The use of animals in military ops is sadly not new. With dolphins and sea lions, they've been trained before by various countries for harbor defense. However, the program in Iran has not been independently verified, and there is little information available about its current status. So, sleep in fear, I guess. These dolphins are off the radar. They're actually below the radar. Number 6, Nimitz UFO. Back in 2004, a group of US Navy pilots led by Commander David Fravor encountered a unidentified, it was a UFO. Found a UFO in the sky while conducting a training exercise right off the coast of California. This object was dubbed the Tic Tac, apparently displayed advanced capabilities that were unlike any known aircraft ever. In 2017, the Pentagon declassified these videos of the encounter and confirmed that it was part of a larger program called the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. The incident sparked widespread interest and debate about the possibilities of extraterrestrial life existing and the government's role in investigating them. Yeah, what's going on? I don't know, comment down below. Do you believe in aliens? I kind of do. It'd be weird if you didn't, right? All that space out there, we're the only ones. Number 5, Operation Snowbird. I thought losing my phone was bad. Oh boy, here we go. Back in the 60s, a US Air Force plane carrying lots of nuclear materials, it crashed in the Himalayan mountains near the border between India and China. Just the thing you want. The crash site was difficult to access, obviously, where it crashed, and the US government mounted a secret mission codenamed Operation Snowbird. The mission was to recover the materials, ideally. The mission was hampered by the harsh terrain and altitude sickness among the recovery team. It was almost next to impossible. Although some of the plutonium was recovered, thankfully, a significant amount was left behind and still remains missing to this day. Number 4, Big Brother is watching. Even allies of the United States aren't safe here. Thanks to Edward Snowden, at the end of October 2013, it was leaked that the states were spying on Germany, France, Spain, and even themselves. That's fun. The NSA had tapped into 35 phones. They were spying on 35 world leaders, not just random people. World leaders, that's pretty invasive. One of which was German Chancellor Angela Merkel, who called out the NSA after they found out and said that this act of snooping was just unacceptable between friends. That's a hard quote. That one hits the heart, really. Now, as you hear this, you're thinking, well, hey, Taylor, I'm not a world leader. What's the big deal here? What do I care? Well, it was also reported that the NSA was monitoring phone calls in Spain for the average folk. Apparently, they monitored around 60 million calls in 1 month, randomly, so yeah, world leader or not, better whisper on the phone, better hang up. It's still pretty jarring. Number 3, leaked voters. Back in December 2015, pretty recent, scary, personal information from 191 million voters was all leaked to the public online. Researcher Chris Vickery found this data while conducting a security investigation. Now, Forbes had described Vickery as, dare I say, a good hacker, because they exist. They're called white hat hackers. They find weak spots in security without sabotaging or exploiting them. That's pretty cool. It's like some Tony Stark stuff. That's the Donnie difference right there. They don't ruin the world. 79% of those eligible to vote were the victims here. All their names, addresses, birth dates, phone numbers, and emails, even those stupid emails you had back in the day, you name it. Things you don't want other people finding out was all let to the public. And it was all let out to third parties. We're still unsure who was behind this entire leak. If you have any hints, comment down below. Tag them, right? CSO Online and databreaches.net suggested that the information here more than likely came from software provider called Nation Builder. But CEO Jim Gilliam announced that that was not the case and that they did not create the database. Although, people lie, so who really knows? He conceded that it is possible that some of the information it contains may have come from the data that they make available for free to campaigns. So a third party took it. and then ran with it. That's terrifying. It's almost worse than if he leaked it himself. Number 2, WikiLeaks war logs. Oh, this one was pretty big. I definitely remember this going down. In Stockholm, buried around 100 feet below street level, is an old nuclear bunker. Today, it's a facility owned by Swedish internet provider Bano. Now this is where they keep servers for WikiLeaks. Yeah, pretty important, pretty spooky stuff. Julian Assange, frontrunner of this whole operation, his hard drive is in this bunker. It's stored behind a 2-foot steel door accompanied by numerous backup generators, so it's not going anywhere, and you're definitely not getting in, no way. In October 2010, WikiLeaks actually published Army field reports from earlier, back in 2004. Now, one of the biggest leaks in US history. This report confirmed that there were over 66,000 civilian deaths in the Iraq war logs, out of the 109,000 in total. This leak also suggested that some American troops were classifying civilians as enemies in their statistics, which changes a lot of things, changes a lot of numbers around. Looks not great. These numbers were from 2004 to 2009 alone. It was a big leak. And finally, number 1, hide your money. Putting your money in your mattress sounds a lot safer than, well, how I'm about to finish. Let's do it. Back in 2016, journalists all over the world were looking into the Panama Papers. Basically, it was a plethora of leaked documents, just a loot bag of all things bad. These all came from a law firm, Mossack Fonseca. Now, the operation here was that the firm would help the super rich hide their money in these offshore tax havens. And before you ask, yes, they got caught, and yes, this whole thing was shut down. In total, there were 140 politicians from 50 countries who were all in on it. They were all busted, including the Saudi Arabian Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, and Iceland's former Prime Minister, Sigmundur David Gunnlaugsson.